Welcome to American Building. I'm your host, Atif Kader. Join me as we explore the skylines and strip malls, the crosswalks and rail crossings, the balconies, the buildings, and the boroughs shaping the next generation of real estate. Let's build common ground. Today, our guest is Tina Ladd, the Managing Director of Real Estate at Aker. Tina studied architecture at Cornell and began her career as an architect at Cohn Pedersen Fox and at Morris Adjemi Architects in New York. She continued her studies at Columbia's Masters in Real Estate program and transitioned to development by joining the related companies. There, she worked on major residential projects in New York and large institutional and mixed-use projects in Detroit. She joined Aker in 2022 and has grown into her current role heading real estate development for the company. Aker is a real estate platform focusing on developing and operating residential communities that connect urban density with the outdoors. Its portfolio includes 19 projects across New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, and they range from 6 units to 775 units. Today, we will talk about the redevelopment of the Kinwood. It's a garden-style apartment complex in Rensselaer, New York. Thank you so much for being here with us, Tina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. So you started your career as an architect, just like me. So tell us about what you worked on and what you learned in that process.
Sure. So right after school, I joined Cohn Pedersen Fox, as you mentioned. Basically, the first week that I was there, KPF was greenlighted to start the Western Rail Yards at Hudson Yards with Related. And I was, lucky enough to be on that team. So I was thrown into this massive scale of development, and it was a small team. And truthfully, it was an incredible experience. The team grew substantially over the time that I worked on this project. I got exposure to super tall buildings, exposure to retail, exposure to the complexity of infrastructure, including the platform over the live rail yards. And, and ultimately it was just a phenomenal learning experience. I learned that I can really love what I do in my career. I had an excitement and a passion about what I was doing. I specifically love the idea of shaping environments. And I think, in school, I didn't have the expectation that I would be working on something so large scale, but it was really incredible to see this, transforming in my backyard as I lived in New York. So ultimately I had this exposure to real estate at a grand scale and also exposure to Related, which, is where I ended up going. But my interests during that time began shifting, and I wanted to really see a more holistic point of view and be on the side of the decision-making process. So before going back to school, which is something I considered, I did get experience at Morris Adjemi. I wanted to learn more about the residential asset class, and which is ultimately what I really focused on as I moved on in my career.
Amazing. So you did mention Columbia, and that's where you transitioned to in order to pursue the master's in real estate. And I believe concurrently you joined Related. So tell us about what that transition was like and what you were learning in those two new environments.
Sure. So, it was really interesting. I decided to do this program at Columbia because I wanted to get a better sense of what real estate development was. Like I had an idea sitting at the table with the design manager at Related and getting some exposure, but I knew that there was so much I was missing about real estate development. And I felt that if I went back to school, I could really, you know, expand my skill set beyond just design and also learn about financial modeling and all the different, pieces that go into real estate development. And I actually started interning at Related while I was in this program. So I immediately kind of jumped into working with Related, and that was a phenomenal experience. It's almost like a very long-term interview. And I ended up staying there because I was really enjoying that experience and I was learning quite a bit.
So in both of those situations at Columbia and at Related, I'm guessing there are people that you learned from and saw as mentors. Could you highlight some of the things that you learned from developers while you were training to become a developer yourself?
Sure. So I wouldn't say that I had any single mentor that kind of stuck with me through my career. but I have had great influencers that I've looked up to, and I've received a lot of guidance. So
Mhm.
even before, I guess, I transitioned to real estate development, I had an incredible boss at KPF who created a wonderful camaraderie around the team. And she set this high bar as this influential woman in a male dominated environment at the level that she was at. So
Mhm.
from the beginning, I saw a woman that was able to achieve so much. And I felt very lucky to have her guidance and her mentorship. And I still take a lot of what she taught me during that time, and that's still relevant in my career.
Who is that?
Marianne Kwok.
Mary Ann Clark. Okay.
Yeah. Um, and she led the design of Hudson Yards while I was there, and she was a phenomenal mentor. And then as I made the tradition, as I made the transition, I should say, there was one woman who was a client of mine when I was at MA, and she was an alum of the Columbia program.
Mhm.
And so I reached out to her and I asked her about her experience there, and she really encouraged me to do the same. And I really appreciated her guidance. She was young. She was starting her own firm in Detroit. And, coincidentally, I ended up working on a project in Detroit later. But she really guided me through that process, and she gave me a lot of advice through my different job opportunities. And we continue to stay in touch, and I definitely consider her a friend. So, it's these various people that you meet along the way that really impact how you think about things. And one thing that I really learned is people are really willing to help. Like if you approach somebody and show interest in what they're doing and
Mhm.
want to learn from them, more or less, they're gonna say yes. Like it's rare that they say no. And that's something that I really learned through this process, especially as a student in Columbia. Like the best time to learn is when you're a student. Everyone is really open and willing to chat with you. And I learned a tremendous amount chatting with different people that I had encountered throughout my career.
Amazing. And could you tell us who that person was in Detroit? That was your client at MA?
Yes, Amelia Patzinier. Um, and she has a firm called Method Development in Detroit.
Awesome. So love to hear about folks starting development companies in different stages of development. And that's great to hear that you were able to learn from those folks. So you were talking about the beginning of your career as a developer, and then there's an immense amount that you learned at Related that you brought to your role at Aker. So before we dive into Aker, I want to understand that process that brought you to Aker, and what were the skill sets that you gained and you learned in that time as you were training as a developer at Related?
Sure. So I think that there were two very influential things that I learned in my time there. One was the ability to manage people. So I
Mhm.
think as an architect, you're part of a team, and you're all like rowing in the same boat, accountable for these large deliverables. But on the flip side, when I moved to Related, you become accountable for multiple teams and alignment of deliverables. So I really enjoyed this idea of managing multiple teams in different disciplines, and thrived on that collaboration and that sort of relationship building that occurred with that. So that's something that I learned that I really loved and I wanted to continue to do. And then the other thing, which I think was really the most impactful, is I learned that there's really nothing that's impossible, and there's always a solution.
Mhm.
So while I was at Related, I had the great benefit of working directly with Stephen Ross on this mixed use plan in Detroit. And I had seen him and seen his visionary at KPF when I was working at Hudson Yards, but working directly with him and seeing that vision that he has and his strong presence, he's really relentless in the way that he pursues that vision. And a great example is we were working on this infrastructural piece of this master plan. It was like this
Mhm.
large open green space over a highway. And the numbers came in for the infrastructure, and they were so high. Like it would never pencil, right? But
Mhm.
that remained in the vision. Like that was not going to leave the vision, and we had to figure it out, right? So I forced myself to sort of learn all of the components about this infrastructure. Like I wanted to know everything about the engineering that went into it. I wanted to know everything about the structure, everything about the MEP. Like what were the things that were driving these costs? And at the end of the day, there was an opportunity to really push consultants, really think outside the box. And I came up with a direct recommendation on how we might modify the design to make that work. And ultimately, it cut the price almost in half. And that was such a great lesson to me that, like, even though we were all sitting there thinking, how can we possibly get this done? There was a solution. It just takes that perseverance and recognizing that there isn't an alternative. And I think at the end of the day, like, if you have a grand idea, you might not execute it exactly how you thought about it, but there
Mhm.
is a version of it that will work. And so you can't really take no for an answer. And that's something that I definitely brought with me to my career in Aker. And it's something that I think about on a daily basis as we push the envelope in what we can achieve.
I love it. Stephen Ross is a really influential person. I had a chance to hear from him, meet him at the Ross School when I went there for one of their conferences. So definitely appreciate that was an awesome opportunity for you. And I'm curious, could you tell our listeners just the maybe like the nuts and bolts or the kind of summary version of what was driving that cost and infrastructure, and what was the idea that allowed that to go from a no to a yes?
Yeah. So again, I say this when this was early in the planning and to date it hasn't necessarily been executed, but I will say so the challenges here was just, covering a large area of a highway, you need substantial ventilation. And the ventilation required, it was just so much structure and so much ventilation and, components to that. But ultimately, just by sort of opening up, like literally opening up parts of this overlay, you can naturally ventilate, and it cut back a tremendous amount of that infrastructure. And it seems simple, but it seems simple when you say it in 5 minutes, but it took like a while to get there. And I have to say, I don't know where it ended up because I wasn't there to see it through, but that practice was really exciting and it taught me a lot.
Yeah, I think the one of the things that's so unique about our industry is the fact that there's so many different professionals that are together creating one reality, is not to assume that what you are thinking or the idea that you have, everyone has it automatically. So being able to not only think about that and develop that solution, but then verbalize it and get the buy-in of everyone else is really impressive. And I think in particular, whether you're the architect in the design process, you're the conductor of that orchestra, or the developer in the development process, you're the conductor of that orchestra. So I definitely appreciate that. Thanks for sharing that. So let's talk about Aker. So um, really amazing company. I appreciate their visuals, their mission, their work that they're doing. So um, tell me about how that process worked. Did they reach out to you? What were your initial impressions, and what attracted you to the company?
Yeah, so they did initially reach out to me, and it was kind of an interesting timing. I had recently had my third child, and I was in this transitional period thinking about like where do I go with this career? Like
Hmm.
there's these moments in life where you start to reconsider. And it just so happened that Aker reached out to me around that time. And Micah Model Wilbrocker had founded the company in 2020. So they were in business school together. They started investing in the Hudson Valley. They both had ties there. And, at that time it was sort of during COVID and there were tailwinds to that market. And they had this opportunity to begin building a small team. And that small team that they were building had really exceptional talent. And they were also really great at selling the dream. So when they approached me, I saw this opportunity really to be part of something that was smaller, something that I could really influence and be more entrepreneurial. And at the end of the day, like it would offer more autonomy and decision making, and I could really get my hands into everything. And that's something that, working at a large institutional firm, there are massive advantages working on these massive projects and getting exposure to all this talent. But you don't really get to see everything in the same way that you do when you're in this smaller entrepreneurial environment. And that opportunity really attracted me to Aker.
Amazing. And at that point, how many projects have they had under their belt?
Oh man, it's hard to remember specifically, but I would say there was a portfolio of 4 properties that we were working on. They had just acquired a couple in the capital region and 2 in Poughkeepsie. So maybe like 7. I'm just gonna take a wild guess as I
Okay. So 7, capital region, you mean Albany, is that correct?
Yeah, the Albany region, Saratoga Springs in particular, was Saratoga Springs. They had just purchased the property that we're talking about in Rensselaer,
Mhm.
and another one in Cohoes, New York.
Okay. So 7 properties. They're currently at 19. So the company has grown since you have also grown in terms of the roles that you have at the company. And a big part of that transition to be able to go from a smaller company to a larger one is growing the team. So talk to me about your role in attracting new talent and retaining employees. And you mentioned that was managing people and working with people is a huge part of the foundational aspects of your career. So what do you think about when you are looking to grow your team, and what do you think makes people successful at Aker?
Yeah, so I have to say one of the best things about Aker is the team itself. It's a team of very talented, eager individuals that are also humble. And I want to emphasize humble because I think that that really differentiates Aker from a lot of um from a lot of shops in real estate, right? One of the things that Mike Amato had said to me when he was recruiting me is that, they look to hire experts in their field to learn from them and listen to them.
Hmm.
So this idea that, you know, I would have a voice coming in because I have certain expertise and specifically in like the design and execution of properties, right? And this was a very different perspective than, other firms and other places that I've worked where seniority seems to take precedent. Like because you're more seniority, you know the most and it's harder to have a voice. And I also feel that in, as a woman in real estate, it has been a little bit harder to have a voice at times. And I really appreciated their perspective. And that is a perspective that I share with anybody that I'm recruiting. I think it's really important that the people that are considering Aker see that it's an opportunity to really have an influence. Like there's nobody like no matter how senior you are, you could be the most junior person on the team. If you have a great idea, that idea will be listened to
Hmm.
and it will be actionable. Like there's no seniority in a good idea. And that's something that I really appreciate about Aker. And it's something that I certainly discuss when we're recruiting. And, as we're recruiting, we're obviously looking for people that are really interested in shaping a newer company, right? And have that drive to make a change.
So what you described in terms of an executive surrounding himself or herself with folks that are very talented and know potentially more than that CEO does about certain topics is something that feels very presidential as well. So I know that George Bush too verbalized that as a key piece of the way he assembled his cabinet, and the same thing that Bill Clinton did as well. So that's certainly, I think, a much bigger minded approach than to perhaps take another path. So you talked about one thing in particular about the challenges that women face in this industry. And I think that's absolutely an important topic to bring up. What were some of the things that you noticed that made you experience that? Like, was it about the way that communications happened, or what were some of the anecdotes or things that you're willing to share?
I mean, I think without getting too specific, there were various times throughout my career where I did feel that for my voice to be heard, I needed to really, really prove myself. Like it
Mhm.
wasn't enough to come into the room and say something confidently and for someone to believe me. But I'm the only woman in a room full of men, which has been very frequent, right?
Sure.
Um, it's just harder. So it's like getting your head down, working really hard, and then earning people's trust. And that's something that I learned that I eventually earned trust, and then things become much much easier at that point. But it's an uphill battle at the beginning. And I have felt that at Aker, you know, there that didn't exist in the same way. And in fact, our business leads at Aker, three of them are women, and it's very unique in that way.
Good. Yeah, I think that what you're describing um, is something similar to what I felt as a different person at many job sites at Turner Construction. And there, what I often found is when you have a leader that is very keenly interested in what everyone has to say, then they're able to really pull out the expertise of people that may traditionally to get over several more hurdles to actually be heard. That's great to hear that anecdote and that background. Okay, so besides being a place where voices are heard, the firm is unique because it's 100% employee owned. So, what does that actually mean in practice? Because that's relatively unusual for development companies.
Yeah, so what it means quite literally is that there are no external owners, only members of the team own the firm. And one thing that's really unique is that our employees are financially vested in each project across all levels. So it's not just, the acquisitions team or just, certain people or certain seniority levels. It's everybody has that opportunity to be vested. And and that creates a level of accountability across the team. Like we're all moving together because we all benefit from the success of these projects. And we all feel like we're really part of it. And again, there's that like extra layer of influence that you feel you have.
So speaking of projects, the Kinwood. So originally built in 2003 and was called Mansions at Technology Park. It has 390 units and they're 1 to 3 bedrooms and they're laid out as a garden style complex.
Mhm.
So describe Mansions at Technology Park and what it was like before Aker purchased it.
Yeah. So first of all, I will say that when I joined Aker, this garden style complex that was more value add is something that I had never really experienced before. Like this was a brand new product type, and I was really excited to use the skill set that I learned in my previous life in ground up development to do something completely different and really like challenge this asset type, right? And Kinwood, or I should say it's now Kinwood, but at the time, Manchester Technology Park, it was owned by the former owner was from the Midwest and just had this
Hmm.
single asset in this region. So it wasn't getting a lot of attention. There was substantial deferred maintenance. It had a kind of a bad connotation. It wasn't like the first place that got attention in leasing. It had eroded paving, it had failing roofs, failing HVAC. There were very few communal spaces across this very large campus. And the resident base was really more transactional. There was less engagement in the community. It was more transient. It was well located next to a technology park, close to Albany, close to Troy. So very well located in a growing job market, but definitely a place where people didn't necessarily settle in.
Okay, so that's the background and the setup that you walked into with
Mm.
Mansions at Technology Park. Um, what was the analysis and um, the thought process that Aker went through in evaluating the decision to buy, and then from there developing a plan of what to do?
Yeah, so I think we saw significant opportunity in the region itself. This wasn't the
Hmm.
first property in upstate New York or in the capital region. We saw that region as one that had significant job growth in the tech, education, and healthcare areas, and we also saw that there was an inelastic housing market. So
Hmm.
just from a market play, it was a really interesting market to be in. Manchester Technology Park, like specifically, just had a tremendous potential for improvement. When you walk that property, because of all the deferred maintenance, I mean, there was literally no reinvestment for 21 years. So this property was just kind of going downhill. So we were able to think about how could we redefine how residents receive this property? How can residents better use the property? How do we increase retention? And how do we achieve market rents here? So those were the drivers of our decision making and our business plan. And and ultimately we really started by, locating those opportunities for improvement, but repositioning the property from a branding perspective was also a big effort that we went through to define how we wanted to approach this project.
Okay. So that was the what you saw there, and then the beginnings of the plan to go forward. So now, as you are diving into the process of redeveloping and renovating this property, what were the phases that you were looking to lay out this work? Like, what are the phases of development? Like, what were you doing when?
Yeah, so I think we effectively started. I mean, we do some things in parallel, right? And this was early on in the company growth and one of our larger projects at the time. So we didn't have a perfect system down yet, but what we did recognize that there was a certain order of operation that would be successful. So we felt that if we really addressed like the overall branding and marketing to kind of provide a guiding light as to what we want to achieve from, what do we want residents to expect when they come to this property? Like, what type of, overall community are we creating? And the branding really helped define that. And then we also looked at it as we need to immediately show some common improvements and deferred maintenance improvements to encourage the residents that we're here and we're going to improve the living environment that you're in. And it's also hard to live at a property when improvements are occurring. So if there are things that are construction, that's definitely inconvenient. So we want the residents to trust us, and a big part of that also is communication. So our overall plan was really, let's get the branding right. Let's start showing deferred maintenance and improvements. Let's encourage residents with great communication, referring back to that branding that we've developed. And let's immediately, and then we'll start renovating units. And we are renovating units on turn. And those units really show the best, and they really do well when there's common area improvements that lift them all up. So by executing the common area improvements as quickly as possible, we see that those residential unit renovations do much better. So that's sort of a way around saying it. It's not so linear in the way that I described it, but we're really thoughtful about the way that the order in which we deliver things and how we deliver them. And a great example of that is we effectively came in, we immediately repaved the property, and that made just a massive improvement. And residents were so excited about that because the roads were in such bad condition. So we come in, we're new owners, we do that, and there's immediately like a positive association with what we're doing as new owners. And then we begin to, execute improvements from there.
And then, what were when you were doing the turns of the units, what were some of the things that you were focusing on those turns?
Yeah, so the turns of the unit, we were very thoughtful about the specific scope because in this market, it's Rensselaer, New York. It's not Manhattan where there's no ceiling in rents. So there's certainly a tipping point in a return on cost. And what we found was most successful in these units were some of the key materials. So we came in, the units had carpeting, and we replaced that with LVT flooring, which just immediately made the units so much fresher. Like you get rid of smells and you have this clean floor. We kept the cabinetry because we felt, replacing the cabinetry here, there wasn't going to be much return on cost. But what we did do is we added cabinet hardware, and that elevated the look of the kitchen. We replaced all of the appliances to stainless steel. And we executed fresh paint, replaced all the fixtures in the bathrooms, all the accessories in the bathrooms, the plumbing fixtures throughout. So everything that you would feel and touch was felt new. And it really was a total transformation. And then one of the things that we do when we execute these unit renovations is we try to stage a unit. And here we staged a unit with very stylish furniture, but also accessible furniture. And it shows residents the potential of where you live. And with some window treatments and some stylish furniture, this apartment that still has, these older cabinets and still has linoleum counters, it can still look very elevated, and it was extremely well received.
Excellent. As a new tenant or a potential tenant to this property, if our listeners are coming here to take a look, walk us through the property and tell us what they would experience along the way.
Sure. So in approaching the property, you would see our new branded monument sign and new landscape. So hopefully some flowering landscape in the spring and the summer, and this very bright, playful monument sign. And then the leasing office is right, sort of the clubhouse is right at the front of the property. And we had gut renovated the clubhouse, provided this really fresh new leasing office area, an area that people can come in and wait and have coffee and, be brought into the leasing office. And at the same time, have a view into all of the amenities that we renovated. So the leasing office before was, or the clubhouse, I should say, wasn't used by anybody but property staff, really. It was effectively this like dated house that had various management areas, but we transformed it into a leasing office. It had a den and a um, game room, a library, lounge areas, a kitchen that has a window that connects to the outdoor pool for like ice cream socials. And then we totally revamped the gym. So upon arriving and going into the leasing office, you have a visual to all of these amenities, which is a great first impression for the property. And then our leasing agents will take them to the model unit, which I think, it just shows the apartment in a way that really fulfills its potential. And in walking around, you see the site improvements that we have executed, which include like new walking trails. Um, we've improved the playground. There's like a tricycle trail that goes around the playground. There are community gardens, community uh, picnic areas, an improved dog park. So just all these areas around the property that can be used by residents. And our phenomenal property management team has been on top of having resident events, as much as they can to bring people together. So that's been very successful.
Okay, so the so the way that we're looking at this project, we talked about what it was before and what you focus on in the renovation and redevelopment process. One key piece that I want to dive into is the rebranding. The rebranding of the property was based on 5 key values. So that's dependable, authentic, accessible, whimsical, and homely. What does that mean to you in the execution of that development plan, and then as a guiding light for the team members that are responsible for managing the property?
Absolutely. So the those values that you just expressed, they all are kind of linked to this idea that we're creating a property that has accessibility and it promotes sort of an authenticity and trust, right? Like that
Mhm.
dependable service, the sense of community and playfulness, like the whimsical is like a little bit playful. There's a lot of families in the community. And ultimately like that all sort of shapes this idea of creating like community, being a good neighbor. And that is something that really shaped the way that we approached this property because we were highly focused on creating community gathering spaces that would truly bring people together and offer an opportunity to have these community events so that people could move in and they could feel like they're at home and they can settle in, make friends and stay for a long time because a lot of the residents here, they might not be entering homeownership anytime soon, and it is a good place for them to settle down. We created a great place for parents to wait for their kids getting off the bus and for kids to wait to get on the bus, like all of these things that from like a day-to-day standpoint provides ease for the residents. Um and truthfully, I think you see so much like luxury living. And I feel like when you hear the word luxury these days, it means nothing. Like people slap that word on every property,
On everything.
regardless. Like it could be like the least luxurious apartment complex, but it says luxury living. And we didn't want to like fool ourselves into saying that we're providing a luxurious living experience. This is a garden style complex in upstate New York, and there's a ceiling to what it is, but we wanted it to be the best of what it could be. And the
Mhm.
best of what it can be is a beautiful community where people feel at home.
I think there's something very it's very important about what you just described. There's something very important about what you described because it feels like when it comes to the branding of real estate, there's this knee-jerk reaction that is really based on this idea of aspiration, that everyone should aspire to this idea of luxury and that luxury is even accessible to all different types of people. And I think it leads to a misalignment of expectations and reality when that term is slapped onto things. There just are clearly aren't and will never be luxury. And I think the terms and the terminology that you guys picked and focused on for this project, I think stake out a very different path, which is one about honesty and authenticity of the product. And there's certainly beauty and really incredible opportunity in that. It just doesn't have to either truly or falsely scream luxury. So I think that that's a really important distinction in a way that is notably different than the way that real estate marketing typically happens. I want to understand the folks that were a part of the rebranding process, the consultants, the team members, and what roles they played.
Yeah, definitely. So, we worked with No Walls out of Chicago. They've been a phenomenal branding partner with us. We've done a few proper projects with them. And they have a pretty defined set of, or a pretty defined like process that they go through. They start with stakeholder interviews, which I think are really, really helpful. So they speak to residents. There might be a select group of residents that they speak to, and they speak to them for quite some time, like up to an hour, and really get a sense of how this resident lives in the property, what this resident is looking for, what they love the most, what they don't like. And it gives them a sense of like, okay, how can we capitalize on the things that they like and improve the things that they don't? They also talk to us, like there's stakeholder interviews with Aker employees as well as our property management staff. So you get this holistic view of how people see the property and see the potential of the property. And with that, they begin working on the brand positioning, which includes like the key values and also a voice and tone. So the voice and tone is really important too. Like, The Walls has a phenomenal way of coming up with, you know, catchy phrases and a unique way to communicate in resident flyers, for example, or emails that really still is very aligned with the brand. Like it's like this neighborly way of communicating.
Mhm.
And that's something they came up with. And then also, I will say, like, part of what they offered, they had an interior designer in house at the time, and we worked with her through the renovation of the clubhouse and the branding colors that we came up with with the visual identity, it's very consistent with how we executed the design, not in like a total literal way, but the design itself is whimsical and it is approachable, and it is all
Mhm.
these things that we discussed as our core values of the brand. And so everything just carries through so cohesively, and that I think that makes the project really successful, that you see that branding, you believe in that branding, and then it is executed from a physical standpoint, and it all comes together. And that cohesion is just really important, I think, in developing these properties.
So No Walls also did the branding and the brand positioning of Aker as a company, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they helped us with the branding and positioning of Aker, and they helped us with our website, which we're all very proud of. Yeah, and we work with them on our property Perennial and Terrytown, or our Everbend at Terrytown, which is one of our newer properties in Westchester.
So as they that's I think very useful to have the company that put together the values and the branding of the company also work on a specific project, a property for that company. They're allowing there to be a tie between the two. So for the Kinwood, what were the final deliverables that you got that became the Bible or the guiding light for the development process and the management?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, the deliverable is really the brand guidelines, and we use those to coach our third party property managers to use that the voice and tone, and to use the templates that are created for resident flyers and things like that. And at Kinwood in particular, we had the benefit of just working with an awesome management team who was very bought into this vision, and they were excited to use it and to excite the residents about all of these improvements, and really, live up to that branding expectation.
So from the way that you look at the investment into rebranding, how do you measure the return on investment on that? Is that a part of your marketing budget, so it's considered purely a spend, or how do you contextualize it? Because that's also notably different than many developers who choose to execute on something without necessarily thinking through the word choice and communication styles and imagery.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it's obviously subjective. So there's no real way to track the ROI of what we spend
Mhm.
on branding, but I can see the value in how it streamlines our process, right? If we have a strong thesis that is like, and when I talk about thesis, it's not necessarily the business plan thesis, but the thesis and what is driving the design of how we're
Mhm.
executing, then there's always something to look back to make sure we're on track. And, and we also work very closely with our third party partners. So, um, my colleague and we have another design manager on our team, and she has a phenomenal eye for branding and a phenomenal eye for visuals. So we really do work hand in hand and work to perfect what we come up with. And we see it, we see value in it, but it's very, very hard to measure because it's not like you're renovating an apartment and you can see I spent X and the ROI is X. Like branding is, it just kind of sets a tone, and you expect and hope that it drives traffic on the website, and it influences how people experience the property.
That makes total sense. And I would imagine, given that there's a portfolio of projects that the company has executed on or is in the process of executing, perhaps another way of looking at that is across projects. Has the process of rebranding delivered differentiation on the product and helped to contribute to meeting of the particular lease up goals? So tell me big picture, how does Aker think about rebranding properties, say on a company level across different properties, and any kind of patterns or trends you've noticed?
Yeah, so we kind of take two different approaches. There's one approach which is come into a property. It might be especially sort of distressed in a way that from a physical standpoint, like Kinwood, and Mansions at Technology Park is not exactly the most like it's not a name that you're gonna think of as a place that you want to settle down and call home. Um,
It's such an odd combination of two things. One
it
is this idea, this feeling of a massive house that's separated from other people, the opposite of community. And then Technology Park feels like some bland Class B suburban office complex that has nothing to do with residential.
100%. So we knew going into this project that it needed to be renamed, and we've entered a few properties where we have gone through the renaming process. So we kind of determine, is this a property that merits rebranding to the point of renaming and completely repositioning the brand. So there are select properties that have that,
Mhm.
and then there are properties that the name is really okay, the reputation is really okay, but we always do refresh the branding because and in that case we might work with some talented graphic designers, and we do a lot of the narrative work in-house.
Mhm.
And that always translates to an updated website, updated photography, um and and again, because we have design in-house, we're able to really create cohesion with those brands and the ultimate product that we create physically. Um, it's just not necessarily as straightforward as, if we do a whole brand reposition where we have this like major brand guideline, but we always do have some sort of brand guideline, and it always does influence how we execute from a design standpoint.
So I want to ask what is currently uh, what's currently exciting, what's going on the property or the company level that you want to share with our listeners to be able to engage with you on.
Yeah, I mean, we are, we're continuing to grow. We're launching our first fund very soon. So we see a lot of exciting opportunities. We've been growing. We recently acquired a property in right outside of Manhattan, and a couple in Westchester. So we're
Mhm.
getting closer to the New York market. But we're constantly looking and excited to continue to grow our portfolio. And ultimately, with these value add properties that we execute, we're just looking to create you know, a property that has best operations, best environment for residents so that we create an environment where people want to stay, where we increase resident retention, and where we see our residents referring other residents. And if we can do those things, we know that we're being successful in what we're executing.
Excellent. So that brings us to the end of our time together. Tina, I wanted to thank you for your time today, and I really appreciate all of the insights that you shared about Kinwood as well as Aker, and then your own path to being a developer.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you having me. And yeah, I look forward to listening to the podcast.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Atif Kader, and thanks for joining me on American Building. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe on your favorite listening app and leave a rating and review. America's housing crisis is one of our greatest challenges, but what are the real solutions? Hear from the developers and other industry experts driving meaningful change. Get our exclusive guide, Housing in America, 8 Ways We Can Solve Our Way Out of a Crisis, at AmericanBuildingPodcast.com.